Story number 1.
I never thought of myself as the type to get scared easily. I was the person who laughed at horror movies, who walked home from work after dark without a second thought. So, when my friends suggested I start jogging as a way to clear my mind, I didn't hesitate. I didn't think I'd find anything frightening along the trails I was about to run. I had just moved into a small house near a stretch of woods on the edge of town. The area was peaceful, quiet, and seemed to be just far enough away from the hustle and bustle of the city to give me some much-needed solitude. I had been feeling a little off recently. The stresses of my job and an ongoing personal situation had started to get to me. My mind felt like it was racing, and I needed something to help calm it down. Jogging was a suggestion from a close friend who swore by it as a form of stress relief. So, after some internal debate, I decided to give it a try. The first few runs were relatively uneventful. I would jog around the block, down the main street, and then loop through the nearby park before heading home. It wasn't long before I found a routine, running every evening after work. It felt good to stretch my legs, to breathe in the fresh air, and just focus on the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. One of my favorite routes took me through the woods. There was an old, winding path that ran alongside the trees, with a few benches placed along the way. It was a serene place. The sounds of the world outside the woods seemed to fade, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the occasional bird call. It became my go-to route, quiet, peaceful, with just the right amount of solitude. But then, after a couple of weeks, something changed. It was a Wednesday evening, about 2 weeks after I had started jogging. The air was crisp, the leaves crunching beneath my feet as I made my way through the wooded path. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the trail. The woods were quiet, too quiet. I had just passed the old wooden bench, the one where I sometimes stopped to catch my breath. That's when I noticed her. A woman was standing just ahead on the path at the edge of the trees, looking into the woods as if she were waiting for something. She was dressed in dark workout clothes, a tight black hoodie, and leggings. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail, but it looked damp, as if she had been sweating for a while. She didn't seem to be moving, just standing there, staring into the woods. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was a fellow jogger who had taken a break. But then I noticed something strange. She wasn't breathing. It was a subtle thing, but something about her posture seemed off. Her chest wasn't rising and falling as it should with each breath. It was like she was holding herself completely still. I tried to shake off the feeling of discomfort creeping over me. Maybe I was just being paranoid. After all, I had heard of people stopping to take a break in the woods before, so I figured she was just a bit of a loner, standing off the path. But as I jogged past her, I couldn't help but glance over, and that's when I saw her face. It was pale. Too pale. Her eyes were wide open, but they looked hollow, as if she were staring into nothing, not even aware that I was there. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Something about her eyes, empty and lifeless, made my blood run cold. I picked up my pace and forced myself to look straight ahead, trying to push the unease out of my mind. Maybe she was just someone out for a walk, lost in thought. But why hadn't she moved? Why didn't she react at all when I passed by? I didn't dare look back. When I reached the end of the trail, I glanced over my shoulder just to see if she was still there. But there was no sign of her. The spot where I had seen her was empty, the trail stretching out in the dimming light of the evening. My pulse still raced, but I tried to convince myself it had all been a figment of my imagination. That night, I tried to forget about it. I took a shower, ate dinner, and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. The image of her face, the emptiness in her eyes, kept me awake. The more I tried to ignore it, the more I thought about her. Something wasn't right. The next evening, I decided I'd try to run the same trail again. I told myself that maybe I had just been tired the night before. Maybe it was just the odd lighting or the shadows playing tricks on me. I would jog the trail again, and this time it would be fine. I'd prove to myself there was nothing to worry about. When I arrived at the start of the trail, the air felt colder, even though the weather hadn't changed. The leaves rustled in the breeze, and the path was as quiet as I remembered it. I took a deep breath and began my jog. Everything was fine at first. I felt the usual rhythm of my feet on the ground, the steady breath in and out, the calmness of the woods surrounding me. But then, halfway through the trail, I heard something. Footsteps. At first, I thought it was just another jogger, someone catching up behind me. But the sound was odd, too close, too rhythmic, like they were mirroring my own steps. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone running alongside me, but there was no one. The path behind me was empty. I slowed down, heart pounding in my chest. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the footsteps didn't stop. They continued, just behind me, matching my pace exactly. I turned the corner, trying to pick up speed, but the footsteps kept following me. I dared to glance behind me again. Nothing. The woods were silent except for the pounding of my own heart. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone, or something, was with me. I didn't know what to do. Panic gripped me. I sped up, pushing myself harder, faster, desperate to reach the end of the trail. But the footsteps didn't stop. They stayed with me, getting closer as though someone was chasing me. Finally, when I reached the clearing near the end of the trail, I heard a voice. It was soft, faint, almost a whisper. "Why are you running?" I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart slamming in my chest. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't want to see anything more. I didn't want to know. I stood there in the silence, the voice echoing in my mind. Then, slowly, I turned. But the trail was empty. The woman from the other night was nowhere to be found. I ran home faster than I ever had before, not daring to look back, my breath coming in short gasps. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, trying to steady my nerves. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced, my heart still pounding from the terror of the run. The thought of those footsteps, matching mine, followed me into my dreams. I didn't run the next day, or the day after that. I told myself I was just tired, just needing a break, but the truth was, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with that trail, something that I didn't want to confront. A few days later, I gathered the courage to go back, but when I arrived at the entrance to the trail, I found that it had been closed off. Yellow caution tape blocked the way, and a sign hung on the post that read, "Trail closed due to safety concerns." I didn't know what to think. Was it just a coincidence, or was something more sinister at play? I never jogged again after that day. I moved a few months later, far away from the woods and the memories that haunted me. But sometimes, when I walk alone at night, I can still hear the footsteps behind me, the same rhythmic pattern matching my every step. And when I glance over my shoulder, I swear I can see her there in the distance, watching. Story the end.
Story number 2.
I had always been an early riser, especially since my move to the small town of Oakwood. After my breakup, I wanted a fresh start. Oakwood was quiet, peaceful, with more trees than people, and it was just far enough from the chaos of city life to help me breathe again. My new routine became my lifeline, a daily jog down the winding country roads that snake through dense woods on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much of a jog, honestly. I wasn't in great shape, but it was something to occupy my mind. I had a small bungalow with a view of the forest, so I'd lace up my shoes, put in my earbuds, and head out before the sun even fully rose, just when the world was waking up and everything felt new and untouched. The forest that bordered the road had an eerie beauty to it. The trees were tall and wide, their branches like long fingers stretching out as though they were trying to touch the sky. The path was a dirt road, winding and narrow, barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass at a time. The ground was uneven in places, covered with leaves in autumn, and puddles after it rained. In the mornings, mist clung to the ground, and the scent of damp earth would fill my lungs. It was calming, like a meditation. But there were moments when I'd get this feeling, a creeping sense of something watching me from behind the trees, just out of sight. I always shook it off. It was just my mind, too used to being in an unfamiliar place. For the first week, nothing out of the ordinary happened. I ran the loop through the woods every morning, my breath steady, the rhythm of my feet a constant hum in my ears. Everything was fine, peaceful. But one morning, on the 7th day, something felt different. It was a Saturday, early in October. The sun was still low, casting long shadows across the road. The chill of the morning was beginning to lift, and the light fog began to recede into the trees. The road was quiet. There were no cars yet, No other joggers. I liked it that way. It was still dark enough that I could hardly see the end of the road, but the quiet was comforting. I reached the half-mile mark, where the road curved around a sharp bend. This was the point where the forest seemed to press in on me, the trees leaning toward the road. It was darker here than anywhere else on the trail, and the air always felt colder. That's when I noticed it, the crunch of leaves beneath a footstep that wasn't mine. I froze. I was sure I was alone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was walking just behind me. Slowly, I turned my head over my shoulder. Nothing. No one. The trail was empty. I thought I must have imagined it, so I continued running, but now my pace quickened. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. My breaths grew heavier as I pushed myself harder. I reached the first intersection where the trail split. There was a small stone wall and a bench at the corner where the woods began to open up a bit. I paused to catch my breath and drink some water. I glanced around, still feeling that strange presence. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the bench, partially hidden by the overgrown bushes, there was a figure. At first, I thought it might have been a hiker, someone else out in the woods, but no, this figure was still, completely still. The person, or whatever it was sitting on the bench, their body hunched over with their head lowered toward their knees. It was unsettling. "Hey," I called out. "Are you okay?" My voice echoed in the quiet morning air, but the figure didn't move. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The figure didn't seem like someone who was just resting, and yet I didn't want to get too close. It felt wrong. I took a few hesitant steps toward them, then stopped when I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The person, if it even was a person, was barefoot. Their feet were strange, long, with toes that curled unnaturally. The skin on their legs was pale, almost ghostly, as though they hadn't seen the light of day in a long time. "Hey," I shouted again, but no response. I didn't know what to do. The figure remained still, not even acknowledging my presence. I turned to leave, but just as I did, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. I spun around, but the bench was empty. The figure was gone. I ran the rest of the loop at a faster pace than usual, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached the end of the trail where the road met the main highway. I didn't even look back. The rest of the day passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My mind kept returning to that figure. Why had they been so still? Why had they been barefoot? I didn't go for my morning jog the next day or the day after that. I was rattled and I kept second-guessing myself. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was just a trick of the fog. Maybe I was just sleep-deprived. But the dreams came. That night, I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. I had dreamed of running again. But in the dream, I wasn't alone. There was someone behind me, their footsteps matching mine. It was as if they were right there, but when I turned around, there was no one. I woke up the next morning with a strange feeling, like I was being watched, as though someone or something had been in the room while I slept. I didn't want to go back to the woods, but I couldn't shake the urge to run again. It was like the pull of the trail was stronger than my fear. So, on the fourth day after the encounter, I went back. I started the jog the same as always. Slow, steady, the chill of morning air filling my lungs. The fog had lifted, and the trees were bathed in the soft light of the rising sun. But when I reached that bend in the road, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. The moment I crossed the curve, I felt it. The sensation of being followed. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see that figure from the bench. But again, nothing. Just the trees, their branches hanging over the path like silent sentinels. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. I pressed forward, focusing on the rhythm of my feet, trying to ignore the weight of my own heartbeat in my chest. But then something strange happened. The ground beneath my feet shifted. The dirt and gravel became soft, like I was running on something other than solid earth. I stumbled. I almost fell, but I caught myself on the edge of a tree, my hands scraping against the bark. I looked down, and that's when I saw it. Footprints. Barefoot prints, leading off the trail and into the woods. They were fresh, the edges of the prints still soft, as if someone had just passed through. I didn't wait to see where they led. I turned and ran faster than I had ever run before, my legs burning, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't look back. I made it to the end of the loop, and that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. I hadn't passed anyone on the trail. Not a single person, no joggers, no hikers, just the eerie silence of the woods. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening to the wind rustling the leaves outside, the occasional creak of the old house settling. At one point, I thought I heard something in the hallway outside my bedroom door, faint footsteps. But when I opened the door, no one was there. I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure from the bench had followed me home. I could feel its presence, lingering, waiting. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't even go outside. A week passed, and I finally decided to leave. I packed my things and moved to a small apartment in the city. I couldn't stay in Oakwood any longer, not with that feeling, that constant sense of being watched. But every once in a while, when I'm walking down the street or running on a treadmill at the gym, I hear it. The soft, steady rhythm of footsteps behind me. I turn, but no one is there. And I always wonder if it's following me. Story the end.
Story number 3.
I had always been a firm believer in the power of exercise to clear my mind. A jog through the local park or along the riverbank was my way of escaping the stresses of daily life. It gave me space to think, to breathe, and to center myself. But that was before the thing I can't explain happened. Before I realized that there are things in this world that even the strongest of minds can't reason away. It all started about a year ago. I had just moved to a new apartment in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. The area was known for its well-kept parks, running trails, and wide, quiet streets. Perfect for someone like me who needed an escape from the noise of everyday life. My job had become increasingly demanding, and I found myself feeling drained both mentally and physically. I figured a daily jog would help with that, something to ground me. The first few days of running felt great. The park was beautiful in the early mornings, with a gentle mist rolling off the river and the trees casting long shadows over the path. I had my route mapped out, a small loop around the park, followed by a stretch along the riverbank, and then I'd return the way I came. It was peaceful, calming, and honestly, I looked forward to it each day. But after a week or so, things began to feel different. At first, it was subtle, a feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck standing up for no apparent reason. It was the kind of feeling you might get if you thought you were being followed. But when I turned around, the park was always empty, save for the occasional jogger or dog walker. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that it was just my imagination. Everyone gets those feelings sometimes, right? I pressed on with my runs, even though I couldn't shake the odd sensation that something was off. Then, on a cool, early autumn morning, things took a turn for the worse. I had started my usual jog around 6 a.m. The air was crisp, the fog still hanging low over the river, and the world was quiet, just how I liked it. As I rounded a bend on the path near the river, I saw someone ahead of me, a figure standing at the edge of the trees. It wasn't too unusual to see someone else out for a run, but something about this person caught my attention. They were standing perfectly still, facing the river, motionless. I slowed my pace, trying to gauge whether they were lost or just taking a break. As I got closer, I realized the figure wasn't moving at all. It was a woman, tall, dressed in a dark hoodie and leggings. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail, but I couldn't see her face. There was something strange about her posture, though. She stood unnaturally still, like she wasn't even breathing. "Excuse me," I called out, but she didn't react. I stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to do. I tried again, a bit louder this time. "Are you okay?" Still no movement, no response. My heart began to race. The hairs on my neck stood up. The mist from the river swirled around us, and for a brief moment the world felt oddly silent. No birds, no distant chatter of joggers or cyclists, just the two of us, frozen in that eerie stillness. I took a hesitant step forward, and that's when I saw it, her reflection in the river. But the reflection didn't match her. It was hard to explain, but the woman's reflection in the water wasn't quite right. The figure in the river was blurry, distorted, and her face, it was blank, like a featureless mask staring back at me. Something about the reflection was wrong. I couldn't explain it, couldn't put my finger on it, but it chilled me to the core. I felt my breath catch in my throat as a sudden wave of fear washed over me. Something about this didn't feel natural. My instincts screamed at me to turn around and run, but my legs were frozen in place, as though I had somehow become a part of the scene, a part of whatever this was. The woman, still silent, finally shifted. But it wasn't the slow, deliberate movement of someone turning to speak to you. No, it was a sharp, jerking motion, as though she were being pulled against her will. Her head snapped to the side, and I saw her face for the first time. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, empty. It was like she wasn't really looking at me, more like she was looking through me, staring into some place far beyond the trees. Her face was pale, sickly even, with a faint, twisted smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I stumbled back a few steps, my breath now coming in ragged gasps. The air felt thick, suffocating. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what was happening. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. And then, without any warning, she turned, walked into the trees. I stood there frozen, not sure what to do. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands shaking. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my throat. The whole scene felt like a nightmare, something that wasn't supposed to happen in real life. But there I was, standing alone on the path, the cold morning air pressing against my skin. I didn't wait around to see what happened next. I turned and ran as fast as I could, my feet pounding the ground, my mind screaming at me to get away. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, locking the door behind me and collapsing on the couch, gasping for air. I tried to tell myself it was just a bad experience, that maybe I had imagined it all. But deep down, I knew what I had seen. I wasn't crazy. There was something out there, something that didn't belong. For the next few days, I didn't go near the park. I stayed inside, too afraid to face whatever it was that I had encountered. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more it consumed my thoughts. I couldn't shake the image of that woman, her vacant eyes staring through me. I couldn't get the sound of her twisted, uneven steps out of my mind. Finally, after a week of avoiding the trail, I decided I needed to face my fear. Maybe it was stupid, maybe it was a mistake, but I couldn't let it haunt me forever. I decided to go back and see for myself if anything was out of the ordinary. I waited until early morning again, when the fog had settled over the river and the park was still. I stood at the entrance of the trail, taking slow, deep breaths. I needed to be calm. I needed to be rational. I began to jog, my eyes scanning the path ahead, my muscles tensing with every step. The morning air was cool, but it did nothing to ease the dread that had settled in my chest. As I approached the place where I had seen her, I felt a familiar coldness creep over me. The same oppressive silence from that morning, the same feeling of being watched. I rounded the bend by the river, and there she was again. But this time, she wasn't standing still. The woman was walking along the river's edge, moving slowly, her head hanging low as if she were in a trance. Her steps were slow and deliberate, almost as though she was counting them. As I watched her, I felt a pull, a strange urge to approach her, despite every instinct telling me to turn around and run. I hesitated for a moment, then gathered what little courage I had left. "Excuse me," I called out, trying to steady my voice. She stopped walking. For a long, agonizing moment, she didn't move. Then her head jerked up. Her eyes met mine. Blank, empty, lifeless. She smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was twisted, unnatural. Her teeth were yellowed, sharp like the fangs of a predator. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, a low, guttural hiss filled the air, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I couldn't breathe. My legs wouldn't move. And then she took a step toward me. I didn't wait to see if she would take another. I turned and bolted down the path, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop running until I was safely back in my apartment, locked inside, the door secured behind me. I never went back to that park. Not once. But even now, months later, I can still hear the faint echo of her footsteps behind me whenever I go for a jog. And sometimes when the wind picks up just right, I swear I can hear her voice, soft and whispering in the distance. Why are you running? Story the end.
Story number 4.
I had always been the type of person who enjoyed a good morning jog. It was my time, the one part of the day where everything was still and quiet, allowing me to clear my head before the chaos of life took over. I had recently moved to a small town called Ridgewood, a place surrounded by miles of forest and winding trails. It was the kind of town where people said hello as they passed each other, where everything seemed calm and serene. It was also the kind of place where you could easily get lost in your thoughts, and that's exactly what I needed after my recent divorce. My new house was on the edge of town, and the morning fog that clung to the trees every day felt like a blanket that shielded me from the outside world. There was a forest trail just behind my backyard, one that stretched for miles. It seemed perfect for my daily jogs. I could slip away early in the morning, enjoy the solitude, and lose myself in the rhythm of my running. I quickly settled into this routine. Every morning before the sun fully rose, I would pull on my running shoes, grab a bottle of water, and set out on the trail. The first mile was always the easiest, the air cool, the ground firm beneath my feet. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the world seemed to fade away. The only sounds were my footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was peaceful, soothing even. But one morning, about 3 weeks into my new routine, everything changed. It was a crisp Tuesday morning, and the fog was thicker than usual. As I jogged down the familiar path, I felt the air grow still, unnaturally still. The usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves were absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to close in around me. I slowed my pace, unease crawling up my spine. It was strange, almost like the forest was holding its breath. As I rounded a bend, I noticed something odd ahead. There was a figure standing just off the trail. At first, I thought it was just someone else out for a jog or a walk, but as I got closer, I realized it was someone, or something else entirely. The figure was a man, but his posture was off, too rigid, like he was standing too still for comfort. He was dressed in old, worn-out clothes, a long-sleeved shirt and pants that looked like they belonged to a different time, maybe the 1950s or 1960s. The strangest part was his face, or rather, the lack of a face. It was as if his face had been obscured by shadows, a deep blackness where his features should have been. My heart skipped a beat. I stopped running and took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't right. I should have turned around, but something held me there. Was it a trick of the fog? My eyes playing tricks on me? I strained my gaze, but the figure didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me, or at least I thought he was staring. The lack of eyes made it hard to tell. I must have been standing there for a minute, frozen in place, before I finally managed to take a step back. That was when I heard it, faint at first, like a whisper on the wind, a voice, low and raspy, like it was coming from deep within the earth itself. Leave. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and ran, my legs moving faster than they ever had. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pushed myself harder, the pounding of my feet, the only sound in my ears. The fog seemed to close in around me, swallowing everything, but I didn't dare look back. I just ran and ran, my heart racing in my chest, until I finally broke through the fog and emerged back onto the main road. I kept running until I reached my house, my legs shaking, my mind spinning. I didn't know what I had seen, or if I had even seen anything at all. But the fear gnawed at me. The voice, the figure, the way the air had felt so thick with something unspoken. It wasn't normal. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread that I couldn't explain. I tried to go about my usual routine, but the memory of what had happened lingered in the back of my mind, like a shadow that refused to leave. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was just a figment of my imagination, a combination of fatigue and isolation. Maybe I had seen a person who was simply lost in the fog, or maybe my mind had played a trick on me. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Every time I passed the window, I would look out at the forest, expecting to see the figure standing there, waiting for me. And every time I would see nothing but trees and mist. But the unease remained. 2 days later, I decided to return to the trail. I was determined to prove to myself that it was all in my head, that I could still run without being afraid. I pulled on my shoes, grabbed my water bottle, and stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cool morning air. The fog was thick once again, but I forced myself to ignore the rising panic in my chest. I started running, slowly at first, then picking up the pace as the familiar rhythm of my jog began to calm me. For a while, everything felt normal. The sound of my feet hitting the dirt, the coolness of the air, the whisper of the wind through the trees, it was all as it had been before. But as I passed the bend in the trail, I felt it again, that oppressive silence, the sense that something wasn't right. I hesitated, my heart thudding in my chest, and then I saw it. The figure was back. But this time, it wasn't just standing there, it was walking toward me. Slowly, deliberately, its movements stiff and unnatural. The same dark, featureless face, the same old-fashioned clothes. My breath caught in my throat as I froze, unable to move. The figure was getting closer, and the air felt colder, as if the temperature had dropped several degrees in an instant. I wanted to run. I knew I needed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. The figure reached me, and I could hear it now, a soft, rasping sound like dry leaves being crunched underfoot. The voice came again, but this time it was louder, more distinct. Leave. My legs finally found movement, and I bolted down the trail faster than I had ever run in my life. I didn't look back. I couldn't. All I knew was that I had to get away, as far away as possible. I ran until I reached my house, collapsing onto the porch, gasping for air. My heart was racing, my entire body trembling with the aftershock of fear. I had never been so terrified in my life. I locked the door behind me and didn't leave the house for the rest of the day. That night, I sat in my living room, the curtains drawn, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, but I couldn't bring myself to leave either. The town was too peaceful, too beautiful, and the idea of moving again felt impossible. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. It was as if the forest had claimed me, and now it wouldn't let me go. The next morning, I couldn't resist the pull of the trail. It was as if my feet were leading me there, even though my mind screamed for me to stay away. I didn't see the figure again, but the fear lingered. Each step I took down that trail felt heavier, as if the air itself was thick with something I couldn't understand. I don't jog there anymore. I haven't been back to the trail in weeks. I've tried to forget what happened, but the feeling hasn't gone away. Every time I go outside, I find myself glancing toward the trees, half expecting to see that dark figure standing there, waiting for me. I don't know what it was. A ghost? A figment of my imagination? But I do know this: the forest has a way of holding on to things, and once it has you, it doesn't let go so easily. Story the end.
Story number 5.
It started the way so many routines do, innocently. A new year, a new goal, jogging every morning before work, just 30 minutes to start before sunrise, before the city came alive. The streets would be quiet, peaceful even. That's what Jenny wanted. A sense of control, a slice of peace. Her route was simple. She lived on the edge of town near the nature preserve, a few blocks of sidewalk, then a paved trail that wound through the trees. It was always empty that early, and she liked the solitude. Trees don't judge you for sweating too much or for wearing mismatched socks. The first week went by smoothly. Aching legs, but no complaints. She felt good. Strong. Cleansed. Then she started to notice the man. The first time, she assumed he was another jogger. Tall, hood pulled low, always a bit ahead of her on the trail. Not running fast, just maintaining a steady pace, never turning around. She never got close enough to pass him. But something was off. His movements were a little too smooth, too deliberate, not quite natural. She told herself it was her imagination. Maybe he was just a serious runner. Some people have weird form. But when she stopped for water at the halfway point, he didn't. He just kept going ahead. Then the next morning, there he was again. Same distance, same pace. A week passed and the sightings became consistent. Every single morning, he appeared at the start of the trail and remained ahead of her until she exited the woods. She started calling him the Shadow in her head. The nickname was funny at first. Then it wasn't. It was a Tuesday when she realized he was barefoot. The trail was paved with rough concrete, and she could see his feet clearly in the glow of the single lamppost near the trail entrance. His soles were blackened, and he made no sound. None. She had stopped tying her music arm strap before beginning, and glanced up as he passed under the lamplight. No shoes, no socks. Just long strides, perfectly balanced. "Who the hell jogs barefoot on pavement?" she muttered aloud. That night, she didn't sleep well. She kept picturing his feet, raw and silent. Then she realized she'd never seen him leave the trail. He always disappeared at the same bend, near an old wooden bridge that crossed a creek deeper into the preserve. Every morning, she jogged up to that bridge, but he was never there by the time she arrived. The first few times she thought he'd gone off trail. But now, that Wednesday, Jenny arrived at the trailhead later than usual. She overslept by almost 20 minutes, cursing herself the whole way. She figured she wouldn't see him this time, he'd be long gone. But as she reached the trail, her heart gave a violent jolt. He was there. Same pace, same hood, same barefoot stride. She stopped running, breath held, and just stared. He didn't look back. He never did. She stood for almost a minute, her ears strained for the sound of footsteps, but there was only the rustle of trees in the breeze and the rhythmic drumming of her own heart. She began to jog, slower now, eyes locked on him. She reached the wooden bridge and stopped. He was nowhere. The trail stretched empty ahead, silent. She walked onto the bridge and leaned over the side. The creek below was low, a few inches of water trickling over smooth stones. Something caught her eye. At the far end of the bridge, near one of the support beams, was a black footprint. Bare. Wet. It hadn't rained in days. The next morning, she didn't go jogging. She tried to brush it off. Maybe he's just weird, she told her coworker Erin over lunch. A barefoot runner who disappears into thin air? That's not weird, that's serial killer behavior, Erin said, half joking. Jenny forced a laugh, but her hands trembled. Thursday came, and she woke at 5 a.m. without an alarm. Restless. She stared at the ceiling, debating. Curiosity fought fear, and eventually curiosity won. She got dressed and drove to the trail this time, parked at the far end instead of starting from her apartment. If he was on the trail, she'd see him from the other direction. She stepped into the woods just before dawn, the dim light painting the path in shades of blue and gray. Birds chirped somewhere high above. The trail wound deeper, then turned sharply at a grove of thin pines. That's where she saw him, coming toward her. He jogged with that same impossible smoothness, no bounce, no sound, just gliding. Jenny froze. He was maybe 20 feet away when she realized something else. His clothes were the same every day. Same hoodie, same black shorts. No logos, no color. And his hood, it never moved. Even with his pace, it remained perfectly still around his face, like it was part of him. She stepped off the trail. He passed her without turning his head, without acknowledging her at all. Her body screamed to run, but her legs wouldn't listen. She stood frozen until he was gone. She ran back to her car and didn't jog again for a week. That weekend, she visited the library. It wasn't something she did often, but something about that figure had burrowed under her skin, and she couldn't let it go. She asked the librarian about local history, particularly anything strange about the nature preserve. Strange? The librarian, an older woman with graying hair and clear blue eyes, tilted her head. Like what? Accidents, disappearances, maybe even hauntings? The woman's eyes darkened. There was a boy, she said after a pause. Decades ago, early 90s, I think. He used to jog that trail daily. One day he just never came back. Search parties combed the woods. Nothing. No clothes, no body, just his shoes neatly placed on the bridge. Jenny's stomach dropped. Did they say anything about the shoes? Like, were they tied or tied perfectly? Like he stopped to take them off, then vanished. It made no sense. There were no signs of struggle. Jenny thanked her and left quickly. That night, she dreamed of the man. Only this time, she was the one ahead and he was following. No matter how fast she ran, he got closer. She could feel his breath on her neck, though he made no sound. When she turned around, there was nothing there. She woke up screaming. Monday morning, she did something reckless. She brought a flashlight and a GoPro, strapped it to her chest, and entered the trail before the sun rose. She wasn't sure what she hoped to capture, maybe proof for herself that she wasn't losing it. She walked slowly, flashlight beam bouncing with each step. The trees loomed on either side like silent sentinels. She heard nothing but her own breath, quick and sharp. Then, footsteps, not hers. She swung the light ahead and caught movement, a figure emerging from the mist. It was him. Only this time he stopped. He stood in the center of the trail, unmoving. Jenny's breath caught in her throat. The flashlight trembled in her grip. She stepped forward just one step. The man turned his head, slow, unnatural, like a glitch in a video file. His face was wrong. Not deformed, not monstrous, just wrong. His eyes were entirely black, no whites, just pools of endless night. His mouth was closed, but blood trickled from one nostril. He raised a hand. Jenny bolted. She ran faster than she ever had, the flashlight beam swinging wildly, catching glimpses of trees and bushes and trail markers. Her chest burned. Her legs screamed. But she didn't stop. When she reached the end of the trail, the sun had begun to rise. She collapsed near the parking lot, heaving sobs racking her body. The GoPro footage was corrupted. She checked the SD card. Files were there, but unplayable, static, blurred images. One frame remained intact. She nearly dropped her phone when she saw it, a still shot of her face taken from behind her. Someone, or something, had taken it as she ran. She moved to a new apartment the following week, far from the preserve. She stopped jogging. She stopped going outside early at all. Months passed. She tried to forget. Therapy helped a little. The dreams faded. Then, one afternoon, while walking home from work, she passed a construction site. A new trail was being paved, just a small, recreational loop behind a school. As she passed the gate, she froze. In the soft dirt near the edge of the trail was a single footprint. Bare, blackened, facing her. Story the end.
Story number 6.
I never really thought much about ghosts. Growing up, my family always believed that once you passed away, you were simply gone. There was no haunting, no lingering spirits. But that all changed one morning when I went jogging through the park near my apartment. I was new to the area, and I'd heard people rave about the local park as a great spot to run, so I figured it would be the perfect place to get back into shape after a long stretch of working from home. What I didn't know was that the park was home to a story that would change my life forever. I had just moved into a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. It was one of those places that seemed nice, but not too fancy, just what I needed. The location was perfect, far enough from the chaos of the city to enjoy some peace and quiet, yet close enough to work that I could easily commute. And the park across the street? It was ideal for jogging. The first few days I kept my usual routine of morning runs. I liked to get up early, around 5:30 a.m., before the world fully woke up. The crisp morning air, the sounds of birds, the peacefulness, it was exactly what I needed. The park was just a few minutes away from my apartment, and there was a nice loop that followed the edge of a small creek, winding around the trees and through a few open fields. The path was quiet, except for the occasional dog walker or fellow jogger. It was the perfect place to clear my mind. But on the sixth morning, things began to feel different. It started like any other run. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the park. The air had that sharp chill typical of early spring mornings, and the dew on the grass sparkled as I jogged past. I was focused on my breathing, my feet hitting the pavement in a steady rhythm. But as I neared the far end of the park, where the trees grew thicker and the path became less visible, something caught my attention. There was a figure standing off to the side of the trail. At first, I thought it was just another jogger who had stopped to stretch. But then I realized there was something odd about it. The figure didn't seem to be moving at all. It was standing completely still, gazing into the distance, facing away from me. I slowed my pace, trying to be polite in case it was someone taking a break, but as I got closer, a chill ran down my spine. The figure was a woman, dressed in dark running clothes, but there was something about her posture that felt wrong. It wasn't that she was doing anything particularly strange. She just seemed unnaturally still. She didn't look like she was resting. She looked like she was waiting for something. Or someone. My heart skipped a beat, and I found myself hesitating. Should I say something? Should I keep running? As I passed her, I couldn't help but glance over at her. Her head was slightly tilted downward, her long, dark hair hanging loosely around her shoulders. I caught a glimpse of her face, pale, expressionless, almost like she was lost in thought. But what struck me the most was her eyes. They were wide open, staring into the distance, but they didn't seem to focus on anything. There was no emotion, no life behind them. It felt like she wasn't even aware that I had passed by. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that was creeping up my spine. It was probably just my imagination. People sometimes get lost in their thoughts, I reasoned, but the feeling wouldn't leave me. Something was off about that woman. I told myself it was just a weird moment, nothing more. Maybe I was just tired. The next few days, I avoided the path where I had seen her. I didn't want to go back there, but eventually my desire to run got the better of me. I had always enjoyed the park, and it was a habit I didn't want to break. On the 8th morning, I went back to the park, sticking to the same routine as before. This time, I was determined to ignore the strange encounter from the other day. As I jogged through the park, everything felt normal again. The air was cool and refreshing, the birds chirping softly in the trees, the grass damp beneath my feet. I was lost in my rhythm, the stress of the week slipping away when I heard it. The faint sound of footsteps. I slowed, instinctively looking around, expecting to see another jogger nearby. But the park was eerily empty. I couldn't see anyone ahead or behind me. The sound of the footsteps continued, though, soft and steady, as if someone was following me at a distance. My heart began to race, and I turned to glance over my shoulder, but the path behind me was empty. The sound of the footsteps stopped immediately. I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks. Maybe the wind was causing the leaves to rustle in a way that sounded like footsteps. Still, the unnerving sensation lingered, as if something or someone was just out of view, watching me. By the time I finished my run, I was shaken. I couldn't get the feeling of being followed out of my mind. Was it the same woman? Was I just being paranoid? I didn't know, but I decided to take a break from jogging the next day. Maybe I needed rest, or maybe I just needed time to think. I was starting to feel like something wasn't right in that park. The following week, I tried to push aside the strange feelings and return to my routine. It was just the usual morning jog, I reasoned. I couldn't let my nerves control me. But when I went back to the park, I found myself avoiding the far end of the trail, where the trees grew thick and the path narrowed. It was silly, I thought, but something about that area made my skin crawl. On the 15th morning, things got even stranger. As I jogged along the trail near the trees, I heard something new. A whisper. It was soft at first, just faint enough that I thought I might have imagined it. But then it came again, louder this time, clearer. "Why are you running?" The voice was strange, disembodied, echoing from somewhere nearby, but not from any person I could see. My breath caught in my throat as I looked around frantically. The park was completely empty. No joggers, no walkers, just me and the trees. "Why are you running?" The voice repeated, more insistent this time. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't move. I wanted to turn and run back to the safety of my apartment, but my legs wouldn't respond. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, the woman from before. She was standing in the exact same spot, staring at me. Her pale face, her unblinking eyes, her stillness. She was closer than she had been before, only a few feet away now, watching me like she was waiting for something. The smile that tugged at the corner of her lips was not a friendly one. It was eerie, cold, as though she knew something I didn't. "Why are you running?" she asked again, her voice soft and hollow. I couldn't speak. My body was frozen in place, terror paralyzing me. I tried to move, but my feet felt like they were stuck to the ground. I was too terrified to take another step. The woman took a single step toward me. I had never been so scared in my life. The look in her eyes, empty, lifeless, felt like it was seeping into my soul. I had to get away. I had to leave before it was too late. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I turned and sprinted back down the path, my heart hammering in my chest. The sound of my footsteps filled the air, but the feeling of being pursued never left. I didn't dare look back. I didn't stop until I was safely back at my apartment, the door locked behind me, my body shaking uncontrollably. For days, I stayed inside. I couldn't bring myself to go back to that park. The thought of that woman, her eyes locked on me, her voice echoing in my mind, it haunted me. I tried to tell myself it was just a figment of my imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. A few weeks later, I moved to a different apartment, far away from that park. I never went jogging again. But every now and then, when I'm walking through a quiet street or even in the midst of a crowd, I hear the whisper again. "Why are you running?" I'll never forget the way she looked at me, the way her eyes seemed to pierce through me. It wasn't just a ghostly encounter, it was a warning. I don't know what it was, but I'm not taking any chances. Story the end.
Story number 7.
I started jogging as part of a New Year's resolution. Nothing dramatic, just 30 minutes, 3 times a week. I worked a desk job in Seattle, and my body had started aching in places it never used to. A friend of mine, Jen, swore by jogging, said it was like therapy, only free. I didn't buy into the zen of it, but I figured I'd give it a try. That was January. By March, I had a rhythm going. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays before work. I jogged in my neighborhood, a quiet residential zone in the Green Lake area. Lots of trees, well-lit sidewalks, and rarely any traffic. The kind of place that feels like nothing bad ever happens. But what happened to me didn't come from some dark alley or abandoned building. It came from the path I ran every morning, the same one everyone else used. That's what still gets to me. It started the first Monday of that month. It was around 5:30 a.m. Still dark, but the sky had started that slow fade into navy blue. The streets were damp from a light overnight rain. I wore a reflective vest and earbuds, one in, the other hanging free, just in case a car or biker came up behind me. I always started from my apartment, cut down through 78th, then looped through Ravenna Park before circling back. Quiet, safe, peaceful. That day, about 15 minutes in, I saw another jogger ahead of me on the trail through the park. At first glance, nothing seemed strange. Tall, long-legged stride, black hoodie, gray joggers. Their hood was up, and they were running with perfect posture. Not unusual in a city where runners are practically a religion. But as I gained on them, something about their movement unsettled me. It was too smooth, too rhythmic, like a metronome with legs. I slowed a little. I don't normally get spooked, but something about that jogger didn't sit right. I remember thinking they weren't breathing heavily. No puffing of air, no sweat darkening the fabric of their hoodie, just that eerie mechanical stride. I tried to brush it off. Maybe they were just fit, or wearing earbuds and zoning out. But then, without turning or signaling, the jogger veered off the path and into the trees. Not down a side trail, just straight into the woods. No hesitation, no glance back. Just vanished between the trunks. I stopped, looked after them for a moment, listening. But the park was quiet. No cracking of twigs, no rustling of leaves. I stood there, frozen, waiting to hear something. Anything. Nothing. Eventually, I shook it off and kept going, chalking it up to some early morning weirdness. Maybe they were doing trail sprints or, I don't know, being eccentric. Seattle's full of weirdos, right? But the next time I went jogging Wednesday, it happened again. Same place. Ravenna Park, same figure, black hoodie, gray pants, same long, fluid stride. Only this time they were behind me. I noticed the soft sound of footsteps syncing with mine just a little too perfectly. I looked over my shoulder, and there they were, maybe 20 feet back. Still no visible face, still too quiet. I picked up my pace a little. They matched. I slowed down. So did they. Always the same distance. I stopped. So did they. No heavy breathing, no bounce in their stance. Just still. Watching. I turned to face them. "Hey," I said, not loud, but firm enough to be heard. They didn't answer. Then they turned, not walked or ran, just turned and stepped off the trail and into the trees again. That same seamless motion, disappearing like mist into the darkness. I jogged the hell out of there. I told my friend Jen about it that afternoon. I half expected her to laugh or tell me I was being dramatic, but her expression darkened. "Ravenna?" she asked. "You saw them there?" "Yeah, twice." She hesitated, then said, "I stopped jogging that trail last year, after I saw something like what you described. Never told anyone. Figured it was just a bad dream, but now I'm not sure." She wasn't the type to scare easily. That shook me more than I let on. I took a break from jogging the rest of that week, told myself I was just tired, that I was letting early morning shadows get in my head. But I couldn't stop thinking about the figure, how it moved, how it seemed to echo me. By the following Monday, I'd convinced myself to run again, but I changed my route. Stayed on city sidewalks, avoided the park completely. It was fine at first, uneventful. Just me, the sound of my sneakers slapping the pavement, the cold morning air burning in my lungs. But about 20 minutes in, I glanced into a shop window as I passed and saw something behind me. Reflected in the glass, about 30 feet back, was the figure. Black hoodie, gray joggers, same stride, same lack of sound. I whipped around. The sidewalk was empty. I looked back at the reflection. Nothing. From that day on, it started appearing more often, never directly in front of me, always peripheral. Reflections, shadows, glimpses between trees. Sometimes I'd hear that telltale pattern, soft, synchronized footsteps behind me when there was clearly no one there. I stopped jogging altogether by mid-March. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. It started happening during the day. Walking to the store, taking out the trash, I'd turn corners and see someone just slipping out of view, or I'd be brushing my teeth and see a shape in the bathroom mirror that wasn't there when I turned around, always just at the edge of my awareness. I started leaving lights on, keeping curtains drawn. The sleep deprivation set in fast. I kept jolting awake in the middle of the night thinking I'd heard footsteps. Once, I swear I woke up to the sound of something breathing inches from my face. But when I turned on the lamp, I was alone. Eventually, I did what most people do when they're scared, but too embarrassed to tell friends. I searched online. I typed in Ravenna Park jogging ghost. The results were thin, but I found an old local forum thread. Buried in it, someone named Nico Shadows described something disturbingly similar. Saw a person jogging ahead of me, looked like they were floating. Black hoodie, didn't respond when I called out. They vanished into the woods. I stopped going after that, but now I see them sometimes outside the park, like they followed me. The thread ended there. I sent a message to the account. No reply. The next night, I woke up again to that feeling of someone in the room. I sat up slowly, trying not to breathe too loudly. My bedroom door was open. I always closed it. In the doorway stood a tall shape. I couldn't see a face, but I knew. I knew it was the figure. It didn't move, just stood there. I couldn't move either. Couldn't scream. Couldn't even reach for my phone. After what felt like hours, but was probably seconds, it stepped back. One step, then another, then it was gone. I barely slept the rest of the night. I left all the lights on, shaking in bed like a terrified kid. That morning, I called Jen again, told her everything. She didn't hesitate. I've been hearing about this thing for years, she said, mostly in whispers, joggers in that park seeing someone who isn't there. Most people think it's just a hallucination, a trick of the light, but some people, they say it attaches to you, follows you. Follows you? Like it marks you. If it notices you noticing it, it doesn't stop. You stop seeing it in the park, but it starts showing up in your life, at your work, in your home. What is it? She didn't answer for a long time. Then she whispered, I don't think it's human. I started seeing it every night after that, never doing anything, just watching from doorways, reflected in windows, standing at the end of hallways. The scariest part wasn't the figure itself. It was how I started to expect it. I began planning around it, keeping all mirrors covered, checking every room for going to bed, sleeping with the hallway light on. Then, one night, I woke to a sound I hadn't heard before. Jogging. Footsteps. Soft, steady, rhythmic. In my apartment. Coming from the living room. Getting closer. Closer. I didn't get out of bed. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The steps stopped just outside my door. Then, nothing. I waited until sunrise to leave the room. There were wet footprints on the hardwood floor. Bare feet, not running shoes. I don't live there anymore. I left Seattle, moved south to California, near my sister. I don't jog, I don't even walk alone anymore, but even here, far away from that park, I sometimes feel it. Watching. Not every day, but enough. And the other night I found a footprint near the foot of my bed. Just one. I wiped it away, pretended it wasn't there, but I know it's not over because every time I think I'm safe, I hear the sound of jogging behind me. Soft. Steady. Inescapable. Story. The end.
Story number 8.
I never liked jogging, not really. It was one of those things I forced myself to do after a breakup, trying to be that better version of myself. People online say it clears your mind, helps you move on, get strong, physically, emotionally, whatever. I just wanted to stop feeling like shit. So I started running every morning before work. There's this trail near my apartment in southern Oregon. Nothing fancy, just a 2-mile loop cutting through some dense trees with a little gravel path and occasional wooden signs marking distances. The locals call it Keene's Trail, and it's usually empty at sunrise. That's why I liked it. No one to see me huffing and puffing or awkwardly walking after just 5 minutes. It was late October when it started. That week, when the air starts biting and the trees go wild with color, I remember the first morning clearly. The ground was still wet from the night rain, and I could see my breath. The trail looked beautiful, blanketed in golden leaves, but something about it felt off. About a mile in, I passed a guy running the opposite direction. He looked normal enough, maybe mid-30s, thin, kind of wiry. He wore a gray hoodie and black shorts. What stood out, though, was how pale he looked. Not just white skin, almost grayish, and his eyes never met mine. Usually, runners give each other a little nod, a good morning, or a tight-lipped smile, but this guy kept his head straight. I brushed it off. Maybe he was deep in the zone. I kept seeing him. Every day. At first, I thought we just had the same schedule. Runners tend to be creatures of habit, right? But there was something strange about how he moved. He didn't really run. He glided. His steps made no sound, not even on the wet gravel. I started noticing more things, like how he never seemed to sweat or breathe hard. His hoodie never changed. Even when it rained, it looked dry. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe he had 5 of the same outfits. Then one morning, I tripped. Not just a stumble, I mean full faceplant, palms scraping, ankle-twisting fall. I hit a raised root. As I rolled over, wincing, I looked up the trail and saw him coming toward me. Relief hit me first. Maybe he'd help, but he didn't. He just kept coming, silent as ever, eyes staring straight ahead like I wasn't even there. I scrambled backward, half expecting him to leap over me or finally react. He didn't. When he got within a few feet, he blurred. That's the only word for it. His form shimmered like heat off asphalt. 1 second, he was there. The next, he dissolved into mist and vanished. I didn't run after that. I limped back to the car, shaking so hard I could barely unlock the door. My ankle was swollen for days, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. Was I dehydrated? Hallucinating? I didn't want to believe in ghosts. I'd never seen anything paranormal in my life. But I knew what I saw. A week later, I convinced myself to try again. During daylight, I started jogging at 4 p.m., right after work. I figured whatever I saw was a trick of the light, early morning fog, or maybe my tired brain playing games. The afternoon jogs were fine. No ghost, no weird runners, just me and the trail. Until I tried going again at sunrise. It was a Sunday. I told myself I'd imagined it all. I missed the way the trail looked in the early light, how quiet it was, and honestly, I missed the peace it brought me. Before the fear. I was less than 5 minutes in when I heard footsteps behind me. Quick, light, perfectly paced. My heart climbed into my throat. I turned around. No one. But the sound continued. Closer now, like someone was sprinting, its bare feet slapping the gravel, but there was no one there. The trail behind me was empty. My breathing turned ragged. I started to jog again, faster. The footsteps matched me. I sprinted. The footsteps chased. I ran harder than I ever had in my life, tearing around the loop, lungs burning. When I finally reached the parking lot, I nearly collapsed. And just like that, the sound stopped. That night, I researched Keene's Trail. There wasn't much, just some articles on local hiking sites. But then I found an old Reddit thread from 3 years ago. It wasn't even about the trail. It was about haunted places in Oregon. Buried in the comments was a single line. Keene's Trail in Coos Bay. Don't jog at dawn. No explanation. No replies. I created an account just to message the user, but their account had been deleted. I couldn't sleep. I needed to know more. I went to the library the next day. Old school. I figured if something had happened out there, it wouldn't be online. The woman at the front desk was surprisingly helpful when I told her I was researching local history for a writing project. She led me to a box of clippings about outdoor spots in the county. It took hours, but I found it. An article from the local paper dated 1997. Headline, Jogger Killed in Hit and Run Near Keene's Trail. His name was Elliot Hart, 34. Local teacher. Ran the trail every morning before school. Witnesses said he'd started jogging down the access road when a drunk driver came barreling around the curve and hit him. The driver never stopped. The paper mentioned a disturbing detail. How the coroner believed Elliot was trying to flag someone down moments before he was hit, judging by the position of his arms. No one was ever arrested. I couldn't help myself. I went back. Something in me needed confirmation, maybe even closure. Maybe I felt guilty, like I knew about him now, and just leaving it alone would be wrong. I left a small candle and a photo of the article laminated in plastic near the trailhead. Then I waited. Not running, just standing. At exactly 6:22 a.m., the time listed on the death certificate in a follow-up article, I heard it. Footsteps, approaching fast. I turned. He was there. The same hoodie, the same dead-eyed stare, but this time he stopped, 10 feet away, just stood there. His mouth moved like he was trying to say something. Nothing came out. I didn't move. Couldn't. He lifted a hand slowly, palm out, like he was reaching for help. I raised mine, matching the motion, heart pounding. And then he vanished. Gone, like a switch had been flipped. I don't know what happened that morning, but I haven't seen him since. Not on the trail, not in my dreams, not in that sickening, heart-crushing way that makes you think you're losing it. But here's the thing. 2 weeks ago, I saw something that brought it all rushing back. I was driving through the old town strip and past a telephone pole near Keene's Trail. There was a new poster stapled to it. Fresh ink, white paper. Missing. Local woman disappears during morning run. She looked about my age. Pretty. Athletic. I pulled over and stared at the poster until my vision blurred. Now I don't jog anymore. Not morning, not evening, not ever. But sometimes I drive past that trail, just to check, just to see. And every now and then I swear I see someone standing near the trees, watching, waiting. Story the end.